Welcome, Agile friends. I'm your host, Vasco Duarte, and I'm here with Stuart Young, who's going to talk to us about visual storytelling. Hey, Stuart, welcome to the summit.
Hello, it's great to be here. It's great to see you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've seen Stuart, so it's also great for me to reconnect. Stuart is a certified Scrum trainer and a visionary in visual thinking and design thinking, passionate about empowering individuals and organizations through impactful storytelling. We'll talk a lot about that in today's session, and agile methodologies to foster decision-making, innovation, and value-driven outcomes. We'll dive into Stuart's talk in a second, but I also want to call your attention to other sessions that we have on the Product Owner Summit this year. For example, Rahul Bhattacharya will have a live session where you can come in and get coaching as a product owner from Rahul himself. So don't miss it. Check out all the other sessions at productownersummit.org. But now let's focus on Stuart's performance, and I do say that with an intention. You will see why in a minute. So Stuart, let's start with something that helps us understand a little bit how you come at this idea of visual storytelling. How did you get started with the whole idea of visual storytelling?
Excellent. Well, thanks again. So basically, I'll go through some of the process and my journey through storytelling. But storytelling as a whole is an undervalued and underused art, I think, in business and especially in products. So it's something that's I'm very passionate about. But my vocation has always been in drawing, but that doesn't give me any more right to talk about this. I've always used visuals as a way of telling stories. What I'll do is I shall just share with you. I'm sharing using Mural. That is one of the tools that I think is quite relevant when we're trying to share stories. But when I talk about storytelling, it's worth understanding and being aware that there's lots of buzzwords out there, as we're aware of in the agile space and in the world of business. Visual storytelling is a narrative technique, and visual thinking is a cognitive process. Both are something that you would use as a product owner to support people to drive value. But my experience has always been in using visuals as a way of generating ideas and solving problems. One of the most important moments of my life was not long after I finished university back in the early 2000s. I worked with adults with learning disabilities, and I used pictures as a way of incorporating accessibility, inclusivity, and helping with the retention of group memory. And of course, for all of you here passionate about product, will know that collaboration and learning collectively is super powerful. And then later in my life, I'd moved on to the world of project management and then into the world of agile. But it's all about telling stories and inspiring and engaging.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that is really hard, at least in my experience, is to convey ideas that might be very abstract, right? Like in the good old days of software development, as it was in the beginning, somebody somehow would write very specific and detailed requirements that others would just have to, quote unquote, code. Here are the requirements. Why aren't you coding? There goes a famous Finnish song about software engineering. But of course, that's not what products are these days. They incorporate very complex and multidimensional concepts that are sometimes quite hard to communicate. How have you seen that communication art evolve in the industry? I mean, you're also a certified Scrum trainer and you work with teams and team members that work with software. How have you seen this, let's call it, from requirements to visual storytelling? What are the steps that you see teams go through from the old school, very detailed text requirements to what you advocate, which is using more visual elements to communicate complex concepts?
Just leaving that visual there as a kind of a reminder of the important things that you've said. One of the key motivators being making the invisible visible and simplifying complexity. Basically the answer is through pictures. I think the problem is two key things in product. One is that we make assumptions, and one is around expectation management. And I think that people assume what we're building or how we're doing it. And what we want to do is we want to constantly get frequent feedback that we're doing the right thing and validating our design ideas. So visuals is really, really important. We'll go on to talk about embracing diversity, embracing the fact that we all think differently. By using a visual, it gets everyone on one page. I'll give you some examples. It's all nice to have pretty pictures and visuals that look like they're engaging. But when you're standing in front of lots of people and you're trying to visualize a concept, it's not about decoration, it's about communication. And often you'll find that that it's not until you put pen to paper and you hear what people are trying to say and articulate from different stakeholders, from different points of view, whether it be key architects or whether it be a human-centered designer, a CTO, a CEO, whatever it is, whoever it is, when they're trying to bring information together, they've all got a different story. And it's not until you put pen to paper that you can visualize that and then bring people together. So for me, it's all around alignment. But we'll go on to talk about different tools and techniques, but just a good old-fashioned flip chart with the right brains and the right minds in the same room really helps get everyone on the same page.
So coming back to the realm of product ownership, when was that moment when you realized that, we really need some visual way to communicate these concepts? The textual,
Yeah.
old school way of communicating these concepts is no longer good enough. How did that come to you?
I'll leave that just there, and I promise I'll stop moving around mural in a second. So for me, back in one of my first early days of being a product owner, I was working for local authority, and in years before then, lots of imposter syndrome because I am not an analytical thinker, but I had been a business analyst, and lots of information about data and being driven by data, which in this story I was. But what I realized was that when I was working for local authority, there was a product that I was working on called Fix My Street. And we were going to integrate Fix My Street with local authorities' systems so people could identify fault reports. Now, through doing so, we had all the data and the analytics needed to understand how we could integrate this and how we could make it work and sort of support the residents of Oxfordshire. What was really interesting was that they hadn't joined the dots, and by using good old-fashioned post-its, working with key stakeholders, be that highways, we needed to integrate with the highway systems, being residents and commuters, and the highways officers that needed to go out and identify and plot where these faults were. It required blending both data and stories to kind of and a customer journey and a colleague journey to kind of set the scene and identify the different personas that played out. And it seems very obvious in child's play, but it didn't wake people up until you saw it and they could see that there were different personas that needed to be considered within this product. And so I think that when we're using and we're talking about visuals and we're thinking about product evolution and development, and we're trying to bring everyone together, there's two really important bits. One is that we're thinking about the doing and the educating and the informing, but we're also trying to inspire. So lots of different early products that I was working on where there was lots of failure. What are we trying to do? We're either trying to wake people up out of their complacency, or we're considering the art of the possible. So for me, understanding process mapping, understanding systems mapping, but using all those things together is really, really powerful. One more suggestion I'd like to share with you was when I was working within safeguarding and we identified so many gaps in the process. And it wasn't until you use information from stakeholders and from subject matter experts to identify the gaps in processes. All of that inspired me because I realized that I could make such an impact through stories in making better improvements.
And there's one aspect to that I want to highlight, which is that no amount of data will be able to convey the importance of something for a person, right? Like data doesn't tell the story is an overlay over the data. And when we are able to bring those two aspects, right, the storytelling and the data, in a way that strikes people, that touches people, then we are able to communicate those concepts. What are some of the techniques and approaches that you have experimented and worked with, Stuart, that help to bring that data and the storytelling together?
You've just sort of mentioned it really, and and it's the blend. So, for example, using both. So, working with statistical analysis, if you're using data and you're thinking about good old-fashioned lean manufacturing, the value add and non-value add activities in a process, that tells our story. But of course, it doesn't reach every single stakeholder. It doesn't tell the stories that everyone wants to hear. But if you incorporate that with customer journeys, and you identify both qualitative as well as the quantitative data, so you're actually identifying, well, how did a customer feel in this key moment of truth at this stage in the process? So kind of blending the two. I think the world of agile and product ownership needs to blend practices and tools and techniques from lots of different spaces. And I know you'd probably agree, from design thinking and service design and service blueprinting, which is probably more commonly found in the world of service design, and design thinking. And then, story mapping that we love in the agile space, and then lean thinking. But bringing these things together, bringing the data and so forth, is so powerful. Some of the most powerful things that I do when we think about kind of you as a product owner needing to be in the center of your stakeholder universe, think about desirability, viability, and feasibility. By mapping processes, by understanding the desirable element of a customer journey, and then delving beneath and looking at backstage processes, you've got everything there. You've got all the viable, feasible constraints and limitations, and then you've got the desirable factor. You've got the whole picture. And for me, that's beautiful.
Taking that further, the whole picture, as you say, there's one aspect where I've always seen visual thinking be extremely helpful, which is that of communicating a vision. And this is something we do as product owners very often. And one of the things that struck me is that the best visions in terms of how they register, how they impact the people we are talking to, the best visions are usually a mix of different aspects that tell a story in a very visual way. And I've played with many different formats. Of course, the one that I use these days, it's the one pager, where you have a picture that tries to create the future perspective of the product, right? What does it bring? How about you? Like when you talk with product owners and yourself, when you are the product owner, what have you seen are viable and also impactful strategies on the visual side that help communicate the vision of the product?
So there's lots of tools and techniques, and I'll share in just a second. But I think more importantly, it's not just the tool that you use, but it's the approach that you take. So whatever you take, I often say one of my other buzzwords or buzz quotes around visual storytelling and thinking is process over art. So whatever the tool or technique is that you use, or template that you use to create a vision, it has to be done in collaboration with others. And I'm preaching to the converted, but if you create any vision and you go, oh, here's your vision, it means it's nothing. So whatever you do use, it's the tool, as Luke Homan would say, tools in your toolbox, not a checklist, but making sure that everybody's on that one page. The other really key thing around vision templates and so forth is around framing. So for me, you want to embrace divergent thinking, so you get the wisdom of the crowd when you're thinking about creating a powerful vision. But what a vision template is tending to do, and I think a lot of people aren't aware of this, is there are so many amazing templates out there. Grove Consulting, the works of different people in our community, Roman Pitchler or whoever else it may be, the business model canvas and Alex de Osterwalder. A lot of these templates, what they're doing is they're providing a frame so that we have that divergent thinking, And then we've got a level of convergence which will take people forward. So just sharing some examples with those dialing in, or sorry, watching this, is just here's an example of some of the templates that I use. And this is from Grove Consulting. So as I say, Grove Consulting would really have these wonderful templates that you may be familiar with by Dave Sibbett, who I describe as the sort of godfather of visual facilitation. And you can see these quite useful templates, which I've used. And this pivot to virtual working, as you can see here, you can work both virtually and face to face, but they take people on a journey. So my answer would be any template that enables a team to create a narrative and kind of converge on the direction of travel.
Yeah, and that aspect of enabling the team to tell a narrative, of course, requires some facilitation skills, not just from the perspective of helping people express themselves in a way that is constructive and so on, but also to be able to create even the concept of a narrative within people's minds, because many of us who work in product development have an engineering background, and in university we weren't very strong on teaching or being taught on what storytelling and narratives are. What are some key tricks that you have found, Stuart, about taking people on that narrative journey?
Oh, great. Yeah. So what many things that I like to do, one is around, as I've mentioned, customer journey mapping and understanding the benefits of storyboarding and storytelling. Storytelling has been around, but of course, it was Webb Smith that was first sort of known to kind of put bits of paper on a wall for Walt Disney and coined the term storyboarding. But there are many different story structures that people probably aren't aware of, but have used or watch. If you like any of the Marvel films or Lord of the Rings, of course, there's the hero's journey. There's Gustav Freitag's 5-step story. The simplest story is which I quite enjoy, and you can blend this very simple approach with 3 post-its, and you can incorporate that into some of the practices used in Agile. Is around a trigger, action, and reward. This really wakes people up into thinking about personas. So trigger, what is the problem? And I often draw a flat tire on your car. What is the action? The action is you get it pumped up, or if you're lazy, you get a recovery person to do it for you, and the reward is that you drive away. And I get people to do that and have a bit of fun by creating a very simple 3-step story. And I get people to reflect on that and think about behavior-driven development, given, when, then. So, it's a kind of a eureka moment where people go, okay, I get that, how powerful a 3-step story can be in conveying different user story expectations.
Yeah, and that ability to kind of, as you said, framing, right? Because this format is just another aspect. That ability to frame also helps us to kind of get to the goal. Like, for example, when we were talking about product vision, we want to be able to unlock the creativity of the team. And if we give them a list of detailed requirements, we're doing the opposite, right? We're locking the creativity. We're not unlocking, we're locking it. We're preventing creativity. And I think this aspect, like you said, this 3-step example, a trigger, an action, and a reward, can unlock, can create the space for that creativity to emerge in the team.
You've just hit on something really powerful. So one of the links that I'll share with people is an interesting video by Tom Woodjack, How to Draw Making Toast. And something you've touched on there is something very simple. You would say, I get people to draw how to make tea, because wherever I go in the world, it's never quite right. But if you get people to draw on one bit of paper how to draw toast, for those that have watched this and know this, it's quite an inspiring video. You hear me out. But you draw it, and what Tom Woodjack explains is that every picture is made up of nodes and links. Nodes being the individual elements and constituent parts of a process or journey, and the links linking it, be it an arrow or a number. He then gets people to move on and use post-its for the nodes, and you identify there's gaps in between. And you just mentioned about the ability to kind of enable the team to be creative. If you think about a storyboard, you no longer need links. And it's the gaps in a story, in between those frames, that allow you to bring the magic and the creativity. And let's bring this back to product ownership: the why and the what, not the how. So I completely connect with what you're saying, in that that's why I think that is the power of storytelling. You're not saying how you can do it, but you're presenting the key narratives and the key milestones.
All right. So I know that some product owners out there, maybe they have an inclination to doodle or draw, and maybe they want to learn a little bit more about how they could use that skill and or even that passion in order to communicate more effectively. Where do you think they should go?
Well, first of all, it's not an exclusive thing. Only some people can do. Sorry, it is for everybody. There are so many different approaches that I would suggest. You can there's some, you can create picture builds. You can just learn from doing. I can share a few examples with those that are listening in. But what I recommend doing is just getting used to being confident to draw, to communicate. I think people, as we get older, sadly, we have our own inhibitions. Picasso once said that we were born artists, but we grow out of it. It's very sad. So just get used to grabbing a post-it and a pen. Remember communication over decoration. If you're struggling to find pictures that represent the words you're thinking of, a good hack is Google image and then icon. So you find the icon. It kind of finds a simple way of doing it. Collaborate, work with people. There's for those of you that know the book Game Storming by Dave Gray, there's an exercise in there called Game Storming. So if you're working in a team, every week, why don't you try and think of a topic or a theme that you need to draw, or be it a product owner. And what happens is that you all draw this thing, and then you can all discuss what would you do differently if you drew it again. One of the key things is simplicity, is the ultimate sophistication. So keep it simple and keep practicing. And finally, it's a three-step process. You actively listen, you think, and then you draw. So practice going to a TEDx talk, listening to it on YouTube, and trying to draw the salient points.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I think of like this, using visuals to aid and even amplify storytelling, I think of narrative. We already talked about it. You shared some examples that trigger an action and a reward. So I think maybe even just three, a one strip, three vignettes that tell a story. When you think, I mean, you've been doing this for many years, right? So when you think about storytelling with images, how do you go about it? Like, let's say you're a product owner and you need to communicate a concept to a wider audience, maybe create an image that will anchor the vision for that product or whatever that is. Like, how do you go about creating that idea and then executing on it?
So the focus is more on the storyboarding and the facilitation, collaboratively again, over the actual, fancy drawing. So for me, going back to what we've been talking about, the first approach that I'd take, whenever the drawbacks or the failures is only when one person has tried to set out what that product will be, as we all know. So I would always recommend, whether it be using a collaborative tool or whether it just be using your post-its, to actually identify and be clear on what that story might be, whatever the story you're trying to tell, whatever it may be, but work in collaboration with that and sort of to try to write that out. I wouldn't draw it. I mean, this is the thing. Visual thinking and visual storytelling, it's not about right brain and left brain thinking. It's about visual literacy. And this is something I found out a few years back. There's a lady called Annalise Tillman, who wrote a white paper on what we see and why it matters. And she suggests that visual literacy is our way of navigating a children's book. And we use that before we learn to read and write. So visual literacy is the way that you express or obtain information. So what I'm saying is, to be a visual thinker or to be a visual storyteller, you don't have to draw fancy pictures. Using post-it notes and grabbing a Sharpie and writing on that is telling something visually rather than writing a big requirements document. So that's the first step. whenever I'm mapping anything out, I always get just a kind of writing out what those key steps are. Then you can refine it. Then you can add pictures or icons or photographs, whatever you want. But the first bit is the structure and the flow. The rest follows.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, the storyboarding is a great example because you can actually build it together. And we do that, right? Like when we do use a story mapping, that's what we're doing. We're storyboarding something. Stuart, we're getting close to the end. We will put the links to the resources you mentioned below the video, so check them out if you want to learn about Tom Woodjack's video. Also, the Scrum Essentials video in 10 minutes, Game Storming, the book, and also Annelies Tillman's white paper. We'll put the links all below the video so that you can easily access that. Stuart, you have the whole audience of the Product Owner Summit listening. What's one piece of advice you have to product owners out there that may have been inspired by this session?
So it does still go on about it's still at the point of visual storytelling, and it's still kind of, I'll go back to my mural here. There's a couple of things that kind of come to mind, but my key thing is sort of something that I think is really important, is the art of not knowing, which leads to success, and actually knowing more about you as an individual. I'm really, really glad that there's a real push at the moment about skills over roles. I love the fact that people are thinking about what are the skills that you need to be a product person. And I created this canvas because, again, I think they're useful for framing, which talks more about what you see, what visibility do you have? What's your disposition of a product, but also what's your personal disposition? Where are your strengths and weaknesses? And actually, I don't like the word strengths and weaknesses. I'd rather talk about skill attributes and characteristics. But who do you need to contribute to what you need to do? Where are your blind spots? And how can you, I always think about the Johari window. Where are the areas that you need support? So I think my sort of contribution to the product owner community would be to say, be open, be transparent, be human, and appreciate that you're not a superhero. You are a human who's mining for truth. So find out who you can work with to collaborate and build successful products.
Yeah, and collaboration is, of course, a core aspect of the whole agile mindset. Stuart, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for being here. Before we go, where can people find out more about you and the work that you're doing?
So I'm hoping to be at Lean Agile London a little later on in the year, as well as I will be at the Agile 2024 conference. There'll be a few of the places I'll be face-to-face, but I'm rather noisy on LinkedIn. So feel free to connect and give it a couple of days, and I'm sure I'll post something.
Absolutely. I'll put the link to Stuart's LinkedIn page below the video so that you can go and connect. Stuart, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for your generosity with your time and your knowledge.
Thank you so much. It's lovely to see you.